There's a kind of man who doesn't demand attention, he doesn't shout, he doesn't chase. He simply exists, and the room adjusts around him. He doesn't walk in with noise. He carries presence like thunder still trapped in the sky. Every weak man feels it, not because it's loud, but because it's true. This man wasn't made in comfort. He was forged in silence, carved in hours no one witnessed, in disappointments that shattered him, in loneliness that nearly broke him, until he made it his weapon. And here's the truth: you were meant to become him. But life didn't hand you the blueprint. It gave you betrayal. It gave you rejection. It left you asking, "What's wrong with me?" while others smiled and walked away. You were taught to soften, to hide your intensity, to lower your standards so others wouldn't feel small around your fire. But that fire, it's still there. It's quiet now. Controlled, waiting, not to destroy, but to rebuild. This isn't another feel-good video. This isn't comfort. This is the start of your reconstruction. These 7 brutal Stoic habits aren't about becoming liked. They're about becoming untouchable. Because real power isn't how loud you are. It's how little you need to speak. It's how deeply you've mastered yourself in a world that profits from your weakness. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. And freedom, in its rawest form, begins with discipline. So today isn't about motivation. It's about transformation, the kind that happens in silence, in solitude, in the inner war between who you've been and who you're now ready to become. Let this be the beginning. Not of who you show the world, but of who the world can never shake again. We begin now. Habit 1. Master the power of stillness. Before action, there's a storm that lives inside you, not chaos. Not destruction, but a force, raw, untamed, ancient. And every time life pokes at you, that force wants to rise. You feel it, don't you? The tightening of the jaw, the clenching of the fists, the heat in your chest, the immediate urge to say something, do something, prove something. But the man who moves too quickly breaks. The man who reacts before breathing bleeds in places no one sees. Stillness isn't weakness. Stillness is strength refined. The Stoics understood this long before we gave it a name. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And bravery in its highest form isn't in how you fight. It's in when you choose not to, because the world wants you reactive. Quick to post, quick to reply, quick to lash out. They call it authentic, but it's just emotional slavery dressed up as self-expression. You become powerful the moment you stop letting everything outside of you dictate what happens inside you. Think about the man who pauses before speaking, the one who listens before responding, the one who doesn't rush to defend, to explain, to justify. He's not afraid. He's just rooted, grounded in something deeper than impulse. And that man, he's dangerous, not because he's violent, but because he decides when to move, when to strike, when to walk away, and when to simply remain still while the world loses its mind around him. Stillness is your sword's sheath. It doesn't make the blade dull. It makes it sharp with purpose. There's a story of Marcus Aurelius. The empire was collapsing on one front. His generals demanded action, but he chose to wait, to walk in silence through his chambers, to think, to observe. And only when the emotions settled did he respond. With the calm of a man who refuses to be owned by fear. He didn't flinch, he absorbed, and when he acted, it was final. That's the level of power that comes from stillness. Now think about your own life, that moment you sent the text too fast, said the thing you didn't mean, reacted before you even understood what was really going on. How many times have you paid the price for being fast, when what you needed was still? The next time the urge rises, the anger, the anxiety, the need to be heard, don't suppress it, don't explode, just pause. Let it sit in your chest like a weight you don't rush to drop. Let it teach you, let it burn clean. Because the moment you choose stillness, you reclaim your sovereignty. You are no longer the puppet of your feelings. You are the commander of your conduct. As Epictetus wrote, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But what if your greatest reaction is no reaction at all? Stillness gives you space, and in that space, you stop being predictable. You stop being manipulated. You stop being pulled into games you were never meant to play. Let the world wonder what you're thinking. Let them feel the weight of your silence. Let them flinch at your lack of urgency, because they've never met someone who doesn't play by emotional rules. Stillness before action isn't passive. It's the highest form of active discipline. It's what separates the fragile from the focused, the emotional from the intentional, the ordinary from the untouchable. So the next time life tries to pull a reaction out of you, sit, breathe. Wait, then move, not with noise, but with precision. And that is where real power begins. Habit 2. Make your presence speak louder than your words. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It walks into the room long before you say a word. It's in the way you stand, the way you hold your gaze, the way you listen, not to reply, but to understand. This is the power of presence, and it's a power most men never cultivate, because they're too busy trying to be noticed, trying to be liked, trying to be understood. But you don't need to be loud to be felt. You need to be still enough inside that people feel you without even knowing why. In a world full of noise, you become unforgettable by saying less, but meaning every inch of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, not declare it, not post about it, not seek validation for it. Be one. Presence is not a performance, it's the consequence of inner alignment." You've met people like this before. They walk into the room and everything shifts, not because they demand attention, but because their energy commands respect. They don't beg for connection, they embody clarity, and in their silence you sense something unshakable. That's not charisma, that's congruence, and that's what Stoicism sharpens within you. The ability to become the kind of man who doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks because it matters. Now look at your own life. How often have you over-explained? How many times have you tried to prove your worth in conversations that didn't deserve your breath? How often have you felt the need to justify who you are, just to feel seen? You don't need to shout your truth. You need to live it, and let the silence around you carry the message further than your voice ever could. Presence is built in private. It's built in how you carry yourself when no one's watching, when you go to the gym without posting it, when you read instead of scroll, when you walk away from drama instead of stepping into it. Those tiny decisions made in silence are what create the gravity of presence later. Seneca once said, "Let deeds match words," but the highest form of that, let deeds replace words. You become the storm behind the calm, the edge beneath the smile, the stillness that unsettles because it doesn't seek approval. People may not understand you. They may even misinterpret your quiet for arrogance. Let them, because your presence isn't meant for everyone. It's meant for those who can feel it without needing it explained. And here's the paradox. The less you try to be understood, the more unforgettable you become, not because of what you said, but because of who you are when you say nothing at all. So from this moment on, you walk differently, not with ego, but with intention. You don't rush to fill silence. You let it stretch. You don't force connection. You let your energy filter the room for you. And when you speak, you do so with weight, measured, clear, unapologetic. Because the man who has presence doesn't just influence people, he shifts the atmosphere. That is your edge, not how loud you can get, but how still you can remain and still be heard. Habit 3. Build quietly. Speak through results. In a world addicted to attention, silence is rebellion. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of focus, the kind that sharpens in the dark while others perform in the light. Most people talk. They post their goals, they announce their plans, they scream for recognition before they've even done the work. But you are called to build differently. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, said, "Well-being is realized by small steps, but is truly no small thing." Read that again, slowly. Because your greatness won't come from what you shout into the world. It will come from what you repeat in discipline when no one is watching. There is something sacred about the grind done in private. Waking up before the sun and putting in the work that no one applauds. Choosing solitude over distraction, mastery over validation. And while they scroll, while they look for dopamine and likes and meaningless approval, you're building something they'll never understand until it's too late. That's how a Stoic builds, not for recognition, not for praise, but for strength, for truth, for peace. Because when the moment comes, when you finally walk into the room, you won't need to explain anything. Your results will echo louder than words ever could. And that kind of presence, it's unshakable because it wasn't rented from applause. It was earned in silence, in repetition, in relentless inner work. Let me ask you, how much of your energy is wasted trying to be seen instead of becoming undeniable? Imagine the version of you who quietly outworks everyone. No status updates, no self-promotion, just action. Day after day, the weights lifted, the books read, the standards raised, the promises to yourself kept. You'll find that when you build quietly, you don't need to convince anyone. You become self-evident. Seneca wrote, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And that's your challenge now. Stop showing the blueprint, start laying the bricks. You don't owe the world an update. You owe yourself a standard. And if they misunderstand your silence as weakness, let them. Because the same people who laughed when you disappeared will be the ones who flinch when you re-emerge. Stronger, quieter, sharper. There's no need to post your progress when your presence becomes your proof. This is the Stoic way, to build without begging for attention, to grind without gossip, to grow in the dark, so that when you rise, the light can't ignore you. Let your legacy be shaped in the hours no one sees. Let your discipline become the thunder no one predicted. Let them doubt your silence until your results make noise they can't deny. Because the truth is, they'll remember your absence, but they'll never forget your return. So from now on, make your silence work harder than their noise. And when it's time to speak, let the results do it for you. Habit 4. Destroy the need for approval and master detachment. Approval is the softest cage ever built. You don't feel the bars until it's too late. You keep adjusting your tone. You keep second-guessing your truth. You keep checking your phone for a message that doesn't come. And somewhere in that pattern, you lose yourself. What started as kindness becomes compromise. What felt like love becomes self-abandonment. And the worst part is, you start calling it connection, but it's not. It's quiet desperation wearing a polite smile. A Stoic doesn't chase approval, he chases alignment. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life." But what does freedom really mean? It means this: you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. You no longer need to be chosen to believe you matter. You no longer give your peace away in exchange for someone else's comfort. Because what is neediness really? It's hunger for validation, for reassurance, for being seen even when it requires shrinking yourself just to fit into someone else's lens. And you've done it before. You've sent the extra message, you've waited for the reply, you've stared at their silence and made it about your worth. But here's the truth: that kind of waiting, that kind of hoping, is spiritual bleeding. You weren't born to be agreeable. You were born to be real. To speak with clarity, to love without clinging, to walk away when your soul is being traded for crumbs. Detachment is not apathy, it's self-respect. It's not about being cold. It's about knowing you're not here to be consumed and forgotten. You are not a convenience, you are a standard. And when people stop treating you that way, you stop showing up like you're available for their indifference. You stop checking who watched your story. You stop crafting the perfect reply. You stop sitting in rooms where your silence is mistaken for weakness. And that's when everything shifts. Because when you master detachment, you become unshakable. You're not reactive. You're not desperate. You're not waiting for anyone to rescue you from your own sense of lack. You walk in whole and you leave whole, no matter what happens in between. Seneca wrote, "If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich." Let that land. Living for the approval of others is spiritual poverty, but detachment, that's wealth, that's abundance, that's the freedom of a man who belongs fully to himself. So the next time you feel that ache, the need to be chosen, the need to be praised, the fear of being misunderstood, let it rise and let it go. Because you were not built to live in emotional debt to anyone. When you no longer need approval, something wild and powerful happens. You gain influence, not by force, but by presence, by being the man who doesn't flinch when people pull away, because you're not here to be liked. You're here to be true. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. Let them question your silence. You no longer chase. You no longer explain. You no longer bend for what doesn't honor you. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. That's mastery. And that is the quiet dominance of a Stoic. Habit 5. Transmute emotion into strategy. Your emotions are not the enemy. They're not shameful. They're not something to suppress, silence, or erase. They're signals. Fire, raw fuel, but fuel can burn a house down, or it can light the path forward. The Stoic doesn't deny emotion. He studies it, he feels it deeply, but moves deliberately. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He didn't say don't feel, he said don't let it control you. That means when you feel betrayed, you don't self-destruct, you observe. When anger rises, you don't explode. You harness. When heartbreak visits, you don't chase. You sit with the pain and let it carve you deeper into wisdom. Emotion is energy, but energy, unchecked, turns to chaos, and chaos is loud. Reactionary, predictable, weak. You weren't born to be a slave to your instincts. You were built to rise above them, because when you speak from a wound, you bleed on people who didn't cut you. When you act from hurt, you often destroy what could have healed. And when you move in rage, you miss your target because your hands were shaking. But what if you could feel without folding? What if you could transform anger into focus, sadness into solitude, longing into purpose? That's the Stoic path. Strategy begins when emotion is observed, not obeyed. Look at your own life. Think about that moment you snapped too fast, wrote that message out of frustration, made a decision out of desperation. You felt it was right at the time, but later you carried regret. You weren't wrong for feeling. You were just untrained in what to do with it. Now imagine this instead. You feel the surge, but you breathe. You pause, you analyze, you ask, where is this coming from? What truth is this emotion revealing, and what is the best move? Not for my ego, but for my future. That's what separates you from those who live at the mercy of mood swings. You begin to weaponize your inner storms. You become calm when others panic, focused when others spiral, patient when others provoke. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Emotion is adversity. It's the inner chaos that invites you to either surrender or sharpen. So the next time you feel a wave coming, don't deny it, don't fear it. Channel it. Let it run through your system, but not run your system. You can be emotional and still be disciplined. You can be hurt and still hold your ground. You can be burning and still build. Your power begins the moment you stop reacting and start responding. Because the man who responds from principle, not pain, not panic, but principle, he becomes untouchable, not cold, not numb. Just composed. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he's learned that fire in the chest isn't meant to be thrown, it's meant to be forged. So when your chest tightens, when the voice inside screams to act fast, pause, translate the emotion into insight, then move with intention. Because emotion untransformed is weakness, but emotion transmuted into strategy, that's pure, disciplined power. Habit 6. Turn loneliness into sacred training. Loneliness isn't punishment, it's preparation. Most people fear being alone. They distract themselves with noise, with people, with movement, anything to avoid facing the silence within. But you are not most people. You're being called to meet the version of yourself that only reveals itself when there's no one left to impress. Because solitude, when embraced with intention, becomes sacred, not because it's easy, but because it strips you down to the truth. To the man you've ignored, to the pain you've buried, to the strength that's been waiting to emerge. The Stoic philosopher Cleanthes once said, "Lead me, Zeus, and you, fate, wherever you have assigned me, I shall follow." That wasn't blind obedience, it was inner resilience. It was the acceptance of discomfort as a forge, and nowhere does that forge burn hotter than in solitude. In the quiet, you will face the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. The wounds, the shame, the thoughts that rise when the room empties and no one is clapping. And yet, if you stay, if you don't run back to distraction, you'll see it. The fire was never meant to destroy you. It was always meant to refine you. Loneliness reveals who you really are. Not who you pretend to be in front of others. Not who you perform for in relationships, but the man beneath the armor. The man who doesn't need approval to feel grounded. The man who can sit in his own company and not feel empty. This is where greatness begins. Not on the stage, not in applause, but in the unseen hours. When you choose growth over escape, when you read instead of scroll, when you train instead of text, When you listen to the silence and instead of fearing it, you learn from it. Look at every Stoic worth remembering: Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. They wrote their deepest truths in solitude. They found clarity in isolation, because alone you are forced to face the only thing you truly control, your mind. And let's be honest, loneliness hurts at first. It feels like rejection, like exile, but it's not. It's redirection. It's a sacred pause, an invitation to stop outsourcing your identity and reclaim your core. You become dangerous when you no longer fear being alone. Because now no one can manipulate your silence. No one can bait you with attention. No one can pull you back into what you've outgrown. You've sat with your shadows. You've stared at your wounds. You've rebuilt yourself not from applause, but from stillness. And that kind of man, he doesn't chase, he doesn't beg. He doesn't need to be seen to know his value. Seneca said, "A man is not poor if he can live with little. He is only poor if he needs too much." That includes needing people just to feel worthy. That includes needing constant affirmation to feel solid. Let solitude teach you what no one else can. Let it become your sanctuary, not your sentence. Because when the world forgets you, you remember yourself. And when you return, you won't be the same. You'll be quieter, stronger, sharper, not because you had something to prove, but because you had the courage to disappear and build in silence. So the next time you feel alone, don't run. Stay, train, heal, listen, because that silence, it isn't empty. It's full of the answers you've been too distracted to hear. And if you can learn to master that space, you become the man the world can't shake. Habit 7. Let people feel the cost of access to you. Not everyone should have access to your mind. Not everyone should get a front row seat to your energy. And yet, how often have you made yourself available to people who didn't value your time, your presence, or your boundaries? How often have you answered the late-night message, entertained the inconsistent connection, or allowed someone to drain your spirit simply because you didn't want to seem distant? But here's the truth. When your presence is always available, it loses its weight. What people don't work for, they don't respect. Seneca once said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." He wasn't just talking about company, he was talking about energy, your most valuable currency. And when you give that currency away for free, you teach others how to spend you. There's a difference between kindness and self-sacrifice, between being supportive and being used. You don't have to be cruel to be clear. You don't have to be cold to be rare. But you do have to let people feel the cost of your access. You become powerful the moment you stop making yourself easy to reach. Not because you're playing games, but because you've raised your standard. Look at nature. Gold isn't found on sidewalks. Diamonds don't sit in grocery aisles. They're buried deep, protected, because their value demands it. So why should your soul be more available than a gemstone? You want to know why some people stopped appreciating you? It's because you showed up too often. Texted first too much, smiled through too many letdowns. You became predictable. And predictability without effort breeds entitlement. Let them earn it. Let them wonder where you went. Let them feel the silence where your validation used to live. Let them notice the absence of your light and question why it ever felt so easy to reach. Because when someone doesn't fear losing access to you, they stop treating your presence like a privilege. You are not background noise. You are not a safety net. You are not a second option waiting to be chosen. And the moment you shift from being overly accessible to selectively available, you change the entire dynamic. You're no longer the man they assume will always be there. You become the one they think twice before approaching, because now your time has boundaries. Your space has conditions. Your energy has value. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So when you let in chaotic energy, when you overextend yourself to those who won't reciprocate, you start to carry their color, their urgency, their emptiness. But when you filter access, you preserve your color. You hold your ground. You lead with silence, with distance, with discipline, and those who deserve you, they rise to meet you, they adjust, they earn their way in. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about remembering that you are not for everyone. You're not a free sample. You're not a discount version of yourself. You are a mountain, still, silent, and impossible to move without effort. So from this point forward, don't chase. Don't beg. Don't explain your shift. Let your silence do what your over-availability never could. Because when people start to feel the cost of losing access to you, they start to remember your worth. Let them. Let them realize your presence wasn't ordinary. It was rare, it was earned, and now it's gone. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. And clarity, when guarded with quiet strength, becomes the most commanding force of all. Conclusion: the silent rise of a Stoic man. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to beg to be seen. You don't need to explain to be understood. The world teaches you to be more visible, more responsive, more agreeable. But power doesn't live in noise. It lives in discipline, in solitude, in stillness, in the brutal habits that forge a man from the inside out. And if you've listened this far, it means something in you is ready to rise, not just to survive, but to rebuild, to walk forward as a man who doesn't fold, a man who doesn't react, a man who no longer gives the best parts of himself to people who didn't earn them. Remember this: you are not here to be liked. You are here to be unshakable, so start moving differently. Speak less. Hold more. Detach with love. Discipline your mind. Value your energy. Let others feel the silence they once took for granted. You're not becoming bitter. You're becoming clear, and in that clarity, you'll find everything you've been searching for: strength, peace, and a presence that commands without a single word. Now, if this message stirred something deep within you, if these habits remind you of the man you were meant to become, subscribe to the Stoic philosophy, because here we don't chase noise. We build in silence, we rise in truth, and we walk forward with nothing to prove, only something to embody. Leave a comment below and tell me, which habit are you mastering next? Let it be your mark, your declaration, your reminder that you don't need to speak loudly because you've already started moving powerfully. Stay stoic, live better, and let the world feel your absence before they ever deserve your presence again.